Always challenge that which you know to be right and which you've been told. So we should always be rethinking our thinking. The thing that we're doing for our children, which I think is going to be beneficial, is bringing them up in a way to teach them to question all the narratives. You realize, like, there's value in paying people for coaching. There's value in paying to go to seminars. There's value in paying somebody who has experience.
The government is created to protect rights, not grant them. And so anything that's in violation of those rights is not valid.
The people at all times can alter, reform, or abolish their government. So at what point in there did the government have the ability to tell you what you can do with your life, your liberty, your property, your pursuit of happiness?
It's healthy to feel shame and correct behavior. We all participated to some degree.
The more people that understand their inherent rights and where they are in this trust formation of government, the stronger we are as a people to stand against the tyranny that is inevitable with our government officials.
This is us, and this is like free people making a private association amongst each other. The government does not have the ability to reach its arm in there and dictate what they do.
Hey, Hans.
What's up?
Dude, looks like you're wearing the same thing as last episode.
Same thing. That's right.
Same here. We just finished recording 20 minutes ago and took a little break and came right back to it for the next one.
Yeah, we had a real doozy about the LA fires. I think that's going to be a great episode. I hope it causes you to think. And we want to do the same thing here. Brian's got talking about some interesting stuff that he's been learning, and a lot of our audience is kind of in the same mindset and has explored a lot of this. And we're by no means experts, but we're always learning, and we want to talk about the law, common law, your rights, what, the hierarchy of rights. We want to encourage you to not fall for the next thing, the next mandate, the next lie. So getting back to some critical thinking, what have you been learning, Brian?
Before we jump into that, it's one of Nelson's main principles, says rethink your thinking, right? So always challenge that which you know to be right and which you've been told. And, the Bible says to prove all things and hold fast to that which is true. Yeah. So we should always be rethinking our thinking. So have the narratives that we've been taught. And we've attacked like the 20th century narratives, not quite ad nauseum, because I feel like I could do it over and over, but we've attacked them enough to know that we believe that a lot of the things that we were told and just accepted to be true are built on sand and are falling apart in front of our very eyes. I remember learning as a kid that the Federal Reserve Bank, we laugh at this now, but the Federal Reserve Bank has put protections in place to ensure that another Great Depression can never happen. Civics teachers, political science teachers, people just believed that. And I believed it because when you're a kid and you're being told something, like, you don't really question the person telling you if you believe that they know something. So it doesn't make you stupid. It just means that you're at a place in your life where you're not really thinking beyond what you're hearing and questioning all that stuff. And so the older we get, the wiser we get, question everything. And the thing that we're doing for our children, which I think is going to be beneficial, is bringing them up in a way that to teach them to question all the narratives. I always have my kids trying to challenge that which they hear, that which other adults tell them. Even what I tell them, I hope they question it, because I guarantee that I still spew false narratives by neglect because I don't know that I'm doing it. We all have these paradigms, these ruts in our brain, and we don't even realize it. It's like our friend Brandon says, if you're inside the jar of jelly, you can't read the label on the outside. And so we just want to talk some more about that exact thing, like rethinking your thinking, challenging that which you believe and the fact that almost everything we were taught and all the narratives that have been handed down to us have been wrong. A lot of them.
Yeah, and if this is the kind of thing that, quote, triggers you, one, if you're getting triggered, like, stop doing that. That's a choice you're making, and that's weakness. Being triggered just means it's striking against your preconceived notions. But let's just preface this. Let's all remember, every single doctor in the country who said that the COVID shot was safe and effective was categorically wrong, because it wasn't even like, now we know they were dangerous and they were not safe or effective. We know that now, but even at the time, for them to say that was unknowable because there had been no tests done on humans ever. So they were participating in the live human trials, but telling you that tests had been done and that it was safe and effective. It's like, you can't possibly know that. And so they either intentionally lied or they were just wrong. But there's no scenario where they told you that and it was the truth. There was zero doctors that had seen or reviewed safety tests because they did not exist. The closest these companies got was killing all of the animals in their trials and not even going to human trials because they didn't need to because of the category of vaccine that it was. Okay. So underline our discussion coming up. If you think we're off the rails or anything, just remember, if your doctor told you that, they were categorically wrong, and there's zero exceptions to that. So if every doctor in the world was wrong on that, except for the few that stood up and lost their licenses, lost their accreditation, et cetera, by challenging this, going against the narrative, that should tell you everything you need to know. And if they can't be trusted, and they can't, let's explore more and let's think critically through this.
It's kind of cool that I was, I don't know, 4 years in front of you in all this. And when you came into the business, I got to watch you go through some of the progressions that I went through. I think you did it at an accelerated pace. But like, I remember the first time we talked and it was just like, hey, you should join this coaching group. And you're like, oh, that's like a lot of money to drop just like to get into a meeting and I remember thinking that same way because you're brought up in this W-2 world where like I can solve everything myself. And like you got this like old worksmanship idea of like, well, if he can figure it out, I can figure it out. But then, as things change, you realize like there's value in paying people for coaching. There's value in paying to go to seminars. There's value in paying somebody who has experience that you want to get better, right? And I mean, do you remember kind of going through those mental exercises, like that stumbling block that was like an obstacle to drop money on a new course or a new thing,
I was active duty at the time. I was still in the Navy. I was changing my paradigm in real time, but I was still a W-2 employee of the Navy. And in the Navy, in the military, in most W-2, you're not rewarded for improving yourself. You're rewarded as far as your career trajectory goes. And if I say some acronyms that don't make sense for a lot of people, like again, a lot of military listeners probably like understand what I'm saying, even if you're a different branch and the terminology is a little bit different. But we get our annual fit reps, right? And for us, we're ranked on like a 1 to 4 scale on your first tour, and number 1 and number 4 got paid the same. And then you go to your next tour, and if you want to get this, I'm going to go to mountain flying school. I want to go get a weapons and tactics instructor patch, like a WTI. I want to get night flying school, whatever it is. You get these qualifications, you go through this extra work, and yeah, you get the patch. You don't get paid anymore. So it's like people want to go and get these qualifications, but would they pay for it if it doesn't provide any additional pay? I was a DLQ instructor, deck landing qualification. So taking students out to the boat to do their first landings ever on the ship, on the back of the ship. And you fly, it's a pretty hard qual to get because you're flying out there, you get the instructor qual, and then not every instructor goes for this qual. There's different paths you can go as an instructor, but getting this one, you're taking students out and you're doing this like 8-hour flight where you have a bunch of 2 instructors and a bunch of students, and each one has to do 6 day landings, and then you have to transition into the night landings. Every student has to do 6. That's their initial qual, right? So like you're out there taking people landing on the boat at night for the first time ever on a tiny little pad, right? It's kind of nerve wracking. You've done it 1,000 times by that point, but taking a new student there and giving them the controls at night, like it can be uncomfortable, right? It takes a long time to get that. It takes a lot of training to get there. I got that qual and I got $0 extra, right? And so the idea that you would pay for training, pay for investing in your craft is a foreign idea when you're in the W-2 world. And so that's why joining this coaching group with Trent Fortner, our mentor, was it was hard for me to stomach that because I'm not used to being able to invest in myself and see a tangible result. But it's a cool way of thinking, and it just goes along with what we always talk about just changing paradigms.
Yeah, it really does. And the reason I bring that up, like, I mean, I actually pay for a whole bunch of other things. I paid to be part of multiple groups and I go to seminars and I'm willing to drop a lot of money to get better at this business, to learn more about what we do and even just to better my understanding of things that I'm interested in, which most of us, that's not too foreign to most of us because, a lot of us had gone to college. And so you kind of get the idea of like, hey, I want to learn this thing. I should pay this person to teach me. That's about the extent of it, like coursework, right? And anyway, this thinking about that, like, now circling back to a lot of the narratives we were told are wrong. For one, there's one right there. Like you can accelerate your success by paying somebody just to show you how to do it. And them not even providing a lot of the work involved. Like, I'm going to pay for your mentorship. Like, I would have thought that was nuts 20 years ago. Like paying for mentorship, like that seems crazy. Anyway, some folks out there. One you should listen to is Jaron Jackson. One is David Jose. His is Dave Cares for You is all his handles. But I started learning some things about fundamental law, common law, our rights as persons in the early stages of that. But like, I've paid to be part of a PMA, which I'll let you talk about. You said you have something relevant on that, Hans, to learn some of these things. And it's pretty cool because I actually asked my daughter one day, she said she was learning about the Revolutionary War. And I just straight up said to her, having not had real deep discussions on this, which is changing now, where do you get your rights? And she said the government. And I think that most elementary level kids would probably say the exact same thing, because most everything we learn has been wrong. What did you think when you were a kid? Did you have a good foundation on that?
Yeah, you just think civics class, and your rights come from this bill. I'm just a bill up on Capitol Hill.
You have a Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
It sounds like something the government is like saying, these are your rights. What did you believe? Do you remember? I can't remember what I thought as a kid.
Well, I never thought through it, and you can go through the entire public education system and never once think through it. And the default assumption is that exactly what your daughter said, that you get these rights from the government.
So what I'm slowly learning, and I'm absolutely not an expert, but it might as well talk about it and might as well have other people thinking about it, is like the order of operations in the way that our government's supposed to work. And a great example is, we were talking a little bit before we started recording here, is like the old mask mandates. Like, somebody's going to tell you that you can't be in their place of business if you didn't have a mask on. It's wrong. And we'll run through that. But I have in front of me here, I'm not going to share the screen, but I have in front of me here the Pennsylvania State Constitution. And I've asked this question a few times, like around even the military, like, when's the last time you read the United States Constitution? And most people, if maybe in high school.
I keep a pocket edition from Hillsdale College.
Nice. Yeah, I've got a handful right behind me here. I actually keep one in my little calf's, lower side pocket on my pant leg in my uniform, because whenever we do stupid briefings that I don't want to listen to, I just sit and read it. Might as well gain something from that. But, most people haven't read that. And then beyond that, a lot of people don't even think about the fact that there's 50 other constitutions in our country. Every state has one. And those lay everything out in definition of where you stand, where the government stands, where the public stands, and where the private stands. I just thought it'd be cool to talk about a couple things here. Like, I'm in the Pennsylvania Constitution because that's where I live. Section 1, Inherent Rights of Mankind. It's very short. All men are born equally free and independent, and have certain inherent and indefeasible rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property and reputation, and of pursuing their own happiness. So those are inherent in all men, indefeasible rights. Life, liberty, property, if we boil it down, it's John Locke from the Enlightenment period. The next part, and the only other part that I'm going to really read, is political powers. All power is inherent in the people. What does that mean to you?
This is not granting these rights. This is just codifying and stating what naturally exists, that we have this power. Maybe I'm jumping the gun on what you're going for, but this is like, the government is created to protect those rights, not grant them. And so anything that's in violation of those rights is not valid. And that is statute law. That is not what actually constrains you. You're not constrained by government statutes, because if they violate these pursuits, then they are invalid.
So if all power is inherent in the people, meaning the collective, all the folks who are given these rights by God, even though it doesn't straight up say that in the Pennsylvania Constitution, it implies that elsewhere, they're inherent in the people. All power is inherent in the people. So is government above us?
No, it's a servant.
Then how does the government get its power?
From the people, and therefore is subservient.
If you're giving your child certain privileges around the house, like when they're a little kid, you probably don't let them outside without you. And then maybe they're a couple years old and you give them the right to go out and play on the patio. And then they're a little older, you give them the right to go out about the neighborhood. So this is some power you had, which was the control of their safety. And so if you're giving it to them, it's something you've already had, right? As a child. And I'm saying they're free and independent people, but we know I'm just speaking of children. I had the power to keep them inside, and I now gave them the privilege to play on the backyard, because they can kind of do that on their own. They're getting a little more maturity. So if I'm giving power to the government, it automatically means that I am the one who had it, not the government. The government isn't giving me anything. But anyway, all power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority. Can any of the other 49 states be different? Because they all fall under what? The United States Constitution, right? So they all have to be a free government. That's implied. It's important. So all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. Well, for whose? Who's there? It says for their peace, safety, and happiness.
For those people who are granting the government those rights to enforce, or not to enforce, but to protect these inalienable rights.
And an interesting way to say that is if I change the pronunciation incorrectly, but just look at the spelling, is what's it mean to have a lien on your house? If the bank has a lien on your house, what's that mean?
They have a claim against its value.
Yeah. So truthfully, like my daughter, even though she had to memorize those words in the Declaration of Independence, I said, what's it unalienable mean? And she said, I don't know. I said, unalienable.
Mm-hmm.
Let's think about it a little bit differently. Unalienable. So nobody can put a claim on those rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. It actually adds a little more meaning because none of us say alienable rights. It's just not part of our normal lexicon. So let's change the word to something that makes sense. Unalienable. And then it's like, oh, okay, you can't put a lien against those rights. So for the advancement of these ends, they have at all times. Does that include a fake pandemic? Well, it does at all times. Like it's not excluded. I shouldn't say does that exclude. Is this privilege and the ensure for them to protect peace, safety, and happiness? Does that go away during a pandemic?
No, not at all.
All right, better way to ask the question. So for the advancement of these ends, they have at all times an unalienable, there's that word, an indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish their government in such manner as they think proper. So the people at all times can alter, reform, or abolish their government. So at what point in there did the government have the right to tell you, or the ability, not even the right, the ability to tell you what you can do with your life, your liberty, your property, your pursuit of happiness?
But Brian, the grocery store is a private business. What prevents them from telling me that I have to wear a mask in their store? It's a private business after all.
But let's think through it. Like, so your life, your liberty, your pursuit of happiness is part in your property. Would any of those have anything to do with like your private health?
Your life.
I'm going to start with the government. I'm going to get to where you're at. Does the government have the right to tell me what I have to do for my health? That I have to take a certain medication, that I have to breathe dirty air if I think I am, or a restricted air in the form of a mask?
No.
So they cannot infringe upon my life, my possessions, my private property. My person is my private property, right? As a person. So that's in the private. Now, the grocery store, you kept hearing all the time. You hear about it everywhere. That's a private company. They can make you not do that. Or anywhere, any stupid restaurant. When you're standing, you have to wear a mask. When you're sitting to eat, you don't. Like all these stupid rules, right? If we grab Black's Law Dictionary, which I don't have it open or I'd read it and show that, but what is the company? Like who formed the company?
They applied for a government license essentially to become an entity filed with the government.
So grocery store ABC, comma, LLC or corp or whatever, right? So they formed themselves. They let government give them the rules in order to do that. Where do we stand when it comes to government?
Above.
We're above. So the government is our trustees to ensure what? To protect what? Our life, liberty, our property. So this person who's under the rules of government, if they're under the authority of government and the formation of their public company, can they tell a private citizen that they can infringe on their health?
Absolutely not.
And are they a public place?
Yes.
If they do commerce in public, they're a public place. So can they deny my admission into their doors because they don't like what I'm doing with my life, liberty, and property? So it's a really interesting thing. And I'm just scratching the surface of this stuff because I'm learning it. But it's like, wow, to actually think through this in the form of a trust, which is what the government is. And they are our trustees to protect rights. And as soon as they're infringed upon, we have the power. We reserved certain rights. So if I reserved a right in our Constitution, that means I had a certain amount. That's like it's almost like in your house, like I have this little office area. And I don't actually do this because I think it's weird, but I could say like, hey kids, you can play all down here in my basement, but I reserve this area for myself. And if I'm reserving it, it means I already own it. It's already mine. And so is all that in front of me that you can't see on the camera, but I'm giving them some room to operate, which means I'm the authority.
Yeah. One thing Ron Paul always says, I don't have the right to go and extract wealth from my neighbor. I can't do that proxy through the government. Now the government does that, but they can't like we have accepted it. Again, we've accepted it to our shame because I can't go rob from my neighbor. What the government has done is inserted itself in a role where it will do that instead. And you can't do that. I can't go and stick you with a needle, right? If I walk up to you and stick you with a needle, that is a violation of your rights. I can't do that, right? So then therefore I can't go through the government to do that, to stick you with a needle. But let's kind of like going back to this grocery store thing. An LLC is an entity formed via the government, right? Like Remnant Finance is an LLC. Like the two of us have formed an LLC. We filed the same paperwork that Vaughn's Supermarket has filed to become a taxable entity. Can we, as Remnant Finance, and everyone's going to laugh when you think about this, but like our rights of what we can do to individuals who choose to do business with us are the same as the rights that Vaughn's Supermarket, any supermarket, has with individuals who choose to do business with them. If Remnant Finance, if we on this podcast started saying, in order to do business with us, you must wear a mask on all Zoom calls, you would laugh at us because that is preposterous. If we said to do business with Remnant Finance, you must have your boosters, you would laugh at us. You're probably not here. You don't have much. You definitely need life insurance if you are following that advice. You should probably get it quick sooner than later, but nobody would give Remnant Finance LLC the right to make decisions about their health, about their physical, like what they wear, what you put in your body, whether it's a vaccine, whether it's food, anything like that. Like we don't get any say in that. And you know what? Neither does Vaughn's. Neither do any grocery store. Being an LLC does not grant you the right to make those decisions. And so no mask mandate of a store is valid. If you would grant the grocery store the right to tell you to wear a mask, that's not a right they have. So that's not even precise wording. Like if you would just grant them an illegal, unmerited quote right, why would you grant us the same as Remnant Finance LLC? Of course not. But our ability to enforce that is the same, which is zero.
Yeah. So to nerd out here a little bit, I've got a copy of Black's Law Revised 4th Edition, or Black's Law Dictionary, excuse me. And so, like public, I'm just going to read the main point here: pertaining to a state, nation, or whole community, proceeding from, relating to, or affecting the whole body of people or an entire community. So, to a state, nation, or whole community, does a grocery store affect the whole body of people or an entire community? I would say yes. All right. So, public building, one of which the possession and use, as well as the property in it, are in the public. Is a grocery store in the public?
Mm-hmm.
Who formed the LLC? Who did they get permission from to operate?
The government.
So whose rules are they under?
The government, which is under the people.
Which is under the people. And so public, wrong one, pertaining to the state, nation, or whole community, proceeding, from the whole body of people. So the people are over the government. The government formed this thing that we gave them the ability to do through their legislature, form these LLCs. So where do we stand in that line, in that chain? And finally, I'm going to scroll over to public place, a place to which the general public has a right to resort. Not necessarily a place devoted solely to the use of the public, but a place which is in point of fact public rather than private. A place visited by many persons and usually accessible to the neighboring public. So is that a public place, a grocery store?
Yes.
The entity, the corporation, it's not a private group, right? It's not in the private. It's in the public. And the public was formed under the legislature of the government. And the government was given an ability to operate by rights given by the people.
Yes.
And the government is to protect the rights, life, liberty, property, your health, as one of the people who gave it an ability to operate, right? So can that grocery store, where do they fall in this chain? Can they infringe on your health?
No.
If you believe that it's a health concern for you to breathe through this restrictive mask and suck in your own carbon dioxide all day, can they infringe on that? No. So now the thing that I'm learning, unfortunately, because I'd love to point to the remedy, is that you put these people on notice. And that's what I'm learning is you write notices, you write affidavits, you send those to the legislature. Because, we just talked about the fact that, like, have you ever read those definitions, Hans?
I have from being in this mandate fight and learning about this stuff. But before that, I'd never come across any of that.
Do you think your legislators have?
No, I don't think so. Honestly.
No, hell no. They don't even understand that hierarchy to begin with. They're just running for office because they're Slick Willie or whatever. And they want to be in the public eye, but half of them don't even know what they raised their right hand and swore an oath to, whether that be their state constitutions or the United States Constitution. So the remedy here that I'm learning, and I'm not going to talk to because I'm super amateur on this stuff we're running through, and I'm way even more amateur on writing those, but is to use the mass of people, not just one person, but it's best if you have the power of a large group to put the government on notice, to put these entities on notice, to put the courts on notice, the governor, the legislators, whatever, and notify them that, hey, we understand what our rights are. We understand the rights we reserve. We understand the role of you and what you're infringing upon. Most of us don't understand how it works. We think that we have to go to the government to take care of things.
I remember during, when it was like all the insanity was still peaking, there was a tactic that was working. I mean, this is short of the sending notice and getting into Black's Law and all of that. This is more like a practical tip here, but we just want, when this comes back, when they try it again, I don't know that they'll have, like, enough people kind of see through it now that I don't know that they have the staying power to do it again. And I think that the fact that people just stopped buying it is why it went away. It's clearly not because like the vaccine worked. It's not, the COVID like went away, like that is all a fantasy. That's like a storytelling. That it was all marketing. But the fact that people just stopped participating, it's like, why was the response different in Florida versus California? Is because people just stopped doing it. And that was the right call. And the wrong call was to continue to do this. So it's going to happen again if they try. And so everyone should just not participate. I don't want of being shamed of, well, some of my family members buy into it, so I'm just going to play it. No, just stop. Like, just stop. Just don't fall for it again. One thing that I remember working, and I've used the line, or like getting into this discussion, and I wasn't even approaching it from the point we're talking about today, but it was the ADA line actually was the most effective that I remember of people challenging these mask mandates. It's because a mask is a medical device, right? If the quote medical authorities are saying that this is a medical intervention, the ADA rules actually protect you, because under ADA disability and discrimination rules, you can't discriminate against someone who has a disability. And part of that is you can't assume they have a disability. So when you, as a store owner, or just, the person behind that plexiglass, impenetrable shield, tells you you have to wear a mask, it's like, well, are you assuming I have a disability? You're saying that I need a medical intervention here. You're not allowed to make those. Ironically, you're kind of flipping the script on there. That was one that I effectively used. And our little market here on the island, like there's this chick who still wears a double mask, I don't know exactly what it is, but I know it's something, because it's like do your part, like protect the air or whatever. On a necklace, still to this day, wears this little thing. It's probably the size of a cell phone, which is like a fan. I don't know exactly what the purpose is, but double mask still. The store still has plexiglass. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's funny. My 10-year-old was, because she was in kindergarten when that stuff started. She was making fun of that the other day. She's like, they actually thought wearing this like plastic over their face was going to help. And I was like, people did, hon. People did.
Yeah. I mean, painter shields are, it's really sad that people fell for this and people did this. Like a painter shield, if I take a spray paint and spray the front of, it's going to stop the painter shield. But if I just reach underneath and like under your painter shield and just like, it's going to get all over your face. It's unbelievable. And just like the fact, the stories from those times, it's just wild that we lived through that. And people, if you participated, you should feel shame. Like, it's healthy to feel shame and correct behavior. That we all participated to some degree. I was because I was in my grad school tour and I was removed from the Navy. So I had none of the Navy pressure. All I had was the local pressure. And we spent most of that time in New Hampshire because Cambridge was so crazy. And so they didn't, like the best story I have was we went to this biker bar. I had some buddies come out for a ski trip. We're at this biker bar in Laconia, New Hampshire, where they have like Laconia Bike Week is like after Sturgis, the biggest one in the country, right? It's a lot of bikers there. So the biker bar there, I go with some buddies and it's packed, right? And this is when there's like 6 feet, businesses are closed. New Hampshire just said F you for the most part. There was still a lot of cuckery going on, but in that area, like no one cared, and bikers didn't care. And turns out bikers are smarter than scientists when it comes to medical safety. Who knew? So, smarter than like the medical profession, I'd say. They handled it better. We'll say that. So I remember we're at the bar. It's packed. It's standing room only, and this is peak COVID. This is when other places were saying, we were like literally, and this is also in the same town. Like we were at a restaurant and we were outside. And they're like, only 4 people around the fireplace and you have to be seated.
It's like, don't you know that the fire will burn this up?
It felt like just a life test. And the right answer was always saying, fuck you. Like, I'm not doing this. But I remember at this biker bar, the bartender rings a bell and everyone gets quiet. And they're like, all right, everyone sit. And I was like, what are we supposed to do? She's like, ATF is coming in. They're doing their spot inspections. No joke. I'm going to sit back here so you can kind of see. No joke. We're standing there. We got a beer in hand. The bell rings and two, just bull dykes and tight, sausage legs fitted into these khaki pants, ATF agents with buzz cuts. Basically, like the LA fire department leadership walks in and look around, and everyone is sitting, but there's 100 people standing at the bar, and everyone around us is air squatting. No joke, air squatting. And so I was like, no way, this is happening. Like, people are doing this.
They're getting below the vapors.
And that was the requirement. And so everyone squats. We're sitting there, you're like,
did you do it too?
Yeah, because dude, it was so funny. Like, okay, we could have stood up, but it was also so funny that like this group of bikers and they're all shouting at the ATF agents, just calling them like fat lesbian, like F you, you're, like everything you can think of. Everyone's shouting at them, which is awesome. They deserve every bit of it. And I was just like, this is incredible. Like, we're squatting here. And so me and my buddies are like, unbelievable. Like, how low do you have to squat for it to count? They stand there for 5 minutes or so. They look around. They don't say anything. They're getting yelled at. They're getting everything they deserve. They should have tied a millstone around their neck and jump into Lake Winnipesaukee. Like, unbelievable that people would do that. But it was just amazing. Like, we're air squatting, looking around and being, there's 100 of us here, and this is to fight a nonsense virus. Like, that is the level of insanity, even in a place like New Hampshire. And New Hampshire was 1% of what Cambridge was doing. And so, like, if we all lived through that, we all participated to some degree. Like, yeah, I did an air squat. I didn't wear a mask almost ever. I didn't air squat for public safety, right? But we all participated to some degree, and we should all feel shame to the degree we participated, and we should never, ever, ever do it again.
Yeah, I was glad I stayed home and like was just like, a little cautious for the first couple of weeks. That was the extent.
That's pretty gay.
Yeah, well, I was lonely.
Hindsight, now we know that was a gay thing to do.
Yeah, but I mean, it's for a couple of weeks. I was fortunate that I feel like my eyes opened. Like, I started going like, nothing about this is making any sense by like early April. So it was like a couple of weeks into it that I was like, this is like nonsensical, and I'm just going to go about my life and hope that everybody else. Like, I remember the first neighbors that were willing to let our kids play together, and I was like, oh, thank goodness, we've been waiting for you. Like, we've been ready since April. Like, to like let the kids out in the neighborhood with the other kids, and when people caught on, that was. But yeah, so we all played. You're right. Almost, I'd say everybody played along to a certain point. And like, if I had to go to the bank, like I needed to get this transaction done. I wasn't going to fight the mask thing. Like, so I wasn't always hardcore. I was where I could be, and where it made sense to play along, I played along. I mean, what are you going to do?
My wife and I were just talking actually about, we both remember this one specific instance, and it was a grocery store, and we walk in there, and everyone has their mask on, and I can still picture the guy. And it was funny that we talked about this like 2 days ago. Both my wife and I could remember the face of the guy, just as like old nice guy, just a greeter at whatever Shaw's grocery store, something like that. He was like, "Hey guys, would you like a mask?" And I was like, "No, thanks, we're good." And he's like, "I have one if you want it." I'm like, "Yeah, no, I don't want it." And thanks though. Have a good one. We just walk on. It's like, you just say no. And I kind of enjoyed the confrontations. I liked passing someone who had their mask and thanking them for doing their part, as I didn't have one on. People either get pissed or they're like, oh God, they take it off, and it's like, this is insane. But yeah, please never fall for that again. Like, let's all take lessons learned and not do it again.
Yeah, it was funny. It was cool though. Like, you remember you'd walk in somewhere, like I remember going into Home Depot one day and everybody had their mask on and I didn't. And I passed some other guy without a mask, and we were both just like,
yeah, it just takes one, and people start following suit.
It was like both of us didn't have one on, and everybody did, and we kind of just like looked at each other and like did the old, if you're listening, you can't see, but every man knows that like there's different head nods that are appropriate for different things, and we both kind of gave each other like the yep, you get it, I'm with you, man. It was cool. It was just cool as like you automatically had this camaraderie with people who were also not wearing it and believing in it. But I was walking into Walmart one time and I had my son with me, and I was just like, don't put that mask on your face, because they were in school, so they had them in their pockets and stuff. And he's like, really? And I was like, no, we're not wearing one. So we walk in. This was past the point where they were like, they had a line outside and only let so many people in at a time. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, all the insanity. If you think back through all of this, it's just, there's so much insanity. Speaking of which, I want to recommend a book called Diary of a Psychosis by Tom Woods. And he did a really important thing. He saw this happening in real time because he wrote a New York Times #1 bestseller in 2008 called Meltdown. And he wrote it inside a month. because it was like, I got to get this out there first and as close to real time as possible. So the next big thing that happened in this country was COVID. And he kept basically a diary in real time of all the crazy shit happening. And if you go back and read that book, it'll like infuriate you because you forgot about how stupid society became during those years. And it's awesome because like it wasn't like a recollection. It was like everything as it was happening. And he kept basically a diary and then published it when it was kind of all over. It's fascinating. You got to read it. Everybody should pick that up. Diary of a Psychosis by Tom Woods. Anyway, yeah, I remember like so we're walking in to Walmart, and I hated to be like somewhat rude to the old lady because she's just doing her thing. It was an old lady sitting on my left hand side, and I gave her like the '90s. Remember, talk to the hand. We were walking in, and she pulls the mask out, and she starts like waving it at me. She's like, doing like this thing. I had my son's hand. We were walking, holding hands, walking in, and I just went, that rule doesn't apply to us. I like gave her the hand, but I just kept walking like chest out strong. And like, what did she say? Nothing. I just walked right in. But it was like, that was my way of being defiant and kind of confrontational as well. Cause I was just so tired of it. So anyway, we did live through a period of psychosis, and it's not just that, but to cap this off in military manner, like what we talked about. One, don't be afraid to invest in yourself. Even if you are in that W-2 world, like learn skills, learn them from people, pay to go to seminars, pay to learn from people, whatever it takes, get in the right groups of people, go outside of your normal line of thinking to learn and better yourself. And then we started talking about all these things around us. Continue questioning everything. Continue questioning us. Continue questioning infinite banking. I don't care. Like, question everything. You really should, because we've all been wrong before. I believe we're 100% right because I put thousands of hours into studying what we do. I don't think I'll ever stray on that. It's one of the most true things that I've come across in my life outside of God and the Bible. Just keep questioning it all. And the remedy that I didn't talk much about because I'm not smart enough and I don't want to screw it all up, but start thinking about like where you are in that order of operations. We just talked a little bit about government, and realize that the more people that learn that, and over time, I want that to be something not probably on this podcast, but I'll probably start recording some stuff when I get better at it and I understand more and I can speak to it a little better and start teaching that, because the more people that understand their inherent rights and where they are in this trust formation of government, the stronger we are as a people to stand against the tyranny that is inevitable with our government officials.
Well, and remedy, let's talk another remedy that we talked about offline here. We talked last time in our episode, going back to what you said about this being something we've thoroughly vetted, spent thousands of hours learning about, and it stands up to all scrutiny that we have heard and that we ourselves had. Keep learning. And listen to our episode last week about the LA fires and how like these timely reminders of some of these truths we're trying to convey, how they apply in an unfortunate way. But another example we talked about in last week's episode, because of these insane, stupid narratives like bird flu, the shelves now in our grocery store, like trying to find eggs and raw milk and all that stuff, like it's empty, right? But next week we are going up to Encinitas, a little beach town north of us, and we are getting raw milk and we're getting eggs. How are we doing that? What entity is not known very well, but how are we getting raw milk when the government is saying that all raw milk production needs to be halted? Even in a state like California, where you are allowed to buy raw milk at the grocery store, right? Well, you can't right now. It's been out of stock for 2 months. But how are we going up to Encinitas and we're picking up raw milk from, along with like meat and eggs and stuff like that, from farms who are not beholden to the government's fake mandates and edicts about public health?
How are they doing that?
Through a private membership association, a PMA.
I just want to bring this up so people are thinking as you're talking. We talked about the fact that grocery store example was an entity created by government under the government rules, under the government legislature as an LLC. They filed it with the government for the government allowed the formation of that company. So in your mind, contrast that to what he's about to talk about.
Yeah, this is us, and this like free people making a private association amongst each other. The government does not have the ability to reach its arm in there and dictate what they do. So if you're an LLC selling eggs to the local, supply chain here, if you are, the company that we get our raw milk from at the grocery store, whether it's the grocery store that says we're not going to sell this or whether it's the company that produces it, the government, someone's listening to the government erroneously and stopping production of raw milk in this area, or they're producing it and it's not getting sold, but someone is reaching into that supply chain and yanking it off the shelf, right? Well, those arms don't get to go into a PMA. It's the same way that like Texas, I remember there's poker clubs, and gambling, that kind of gambling is not legal in Texas, but you can go. I just down the road from my house, there was a Texas Hold'em room, and you could go and you could play. Well, how could you do that? It's not fake money. You're going and playing. You're playing real poker. It's because it's a private membership association where free people join together and set the conditions of how this private membership association is going to be, but you pay into it. So you walk in, you pay a $5 fee, you join the membership temporarily, or you join permanently, and now you are transacting with free individuals outside of government control. So Texas law, Texas government says you can't gamble, but I played poker in San Antonio. I just paid a fee. I joined a membership association the same way I paid to get into a private member association here, and I'm getting raw milk next week, even though it's bare shelves and you can't find it in grocery stores here in California right now.
There's actually a pretty cool example. Now, I wasn't a firsthand witness to this, but when I used to be a school teacher, it was a town called McKeesport. And that was like an old mill town at one time. So it had all these like, private clubs. And it was, Pittsburgh was an interesting place because with all the work that here was like as a booming, mill town in the 20th century, all these immigrants came in and they formed pockets and neighborhoods. So you had like the Italian neighborhood, you had the Polish neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the Irish neighborhoods, and sometimes within one kind of city area. So all of them formed private clubs. There's still Italian clubs, there's still Polish clubs like in this area. It's kind of neat, but there was one club in McKeesport and it was a men's only club. Women were forbidden. It was a PMA club. Only men were allowed in. And something occurred that the police were called and they forbid a female police officer from coming in to handle the crime. And they literally did it. Like they were like, no, she can come in. They said, no, she can't. She is forbidden from being inside of the walls of this building. And they only let male officers in the building. And it's just like, that was somebody that understood their rights as a private membership agreement or as a PMA. And whoever was in charge there actually understood where they stood in the line of government. And they were not formed under the government, and thus they could deny a government official, a public officer, female, from coming into their building. They could have prevented all of them from coming in. I'm certain. In the event of a felony, they probably would have had to. There's some rules around that do exist, but they were able to keep her out, which I thought was like fascinating that they stood strong on their rights.
And these exist. Like this is real. So if you don't really buy what Brian is saying, which comes directly from state constitutions, so I don't know what you're referring to. If you what source you might use if you don't believe what Brian just read to you, but you can play poker in San Antonio, a mile, 2 miles from where I grew up. You can do that, even though gambling is illegal in Texas. Now, no, like producers aren't allowed to sell raw milk in California currently due to the public health emergency of the fake bird flu. But I am going to get it. So like it exists. Like I will have raw milk in my fridge. I sat and played poker in San Antonio. Like those two things happened. Those are real. That's the reality, is that you can do that. Do you think if the government had a way, if they say you cannot gamble in Texas, but these rooms all over the state people are gambling in, do you think they would shut that down if they could? Yes, of course they would. Of course they would. Right? Because they want to tax that. They want to be involved. Like if it's going to happen in the state, they want to be involved in that. Name a communist country that we make an enemy out of. Like, do you think the government of California is any better than those governments? No, absolutely not. They're horrible tyrants. Do you think that they would stop these PMAs from selling raw milk and free range eggs and all these things if they could? Absolutely they would. But they can't. They cannot. And if you don't believe me, go to farmmatch.com. This is not an affiliate. We don't have none of the thing here. Like farmmatch.com is a site that lists, like you search in your local area. So I just searched my zip code and they said, here's the ones that serve your local area. But you can do it all over the country. You can go farmmatch.com and find one in Pittsburgh. You don't buy from Farmmatch. Farmmatch will match you up with a PMA in your area. And then you read word through word. I try to find it, but their site's pretty janky, but we have an order that's being placed. But the agreement is like, we are free. Like these are the rights that you have within this private organization. you cannot do this, you cannot do, like, they can actually set binding rules for this private association. I don't have to join. If I join, I have to abide by their rules. Now, those rules intentionally say they do not go against any fundamental right that we have. They honor those rights, but then as far as the buying and selling of, they regulate the commerce within the PMA, but they don't do so in a manner that violates our rights. And so go to farmash.com and just even if you're in a state that doesn't allow the sale of raw milk, like just verify this yourself and go buy some raw milk, because people can interact in commerce in this way, and it's outside of the government. So this does exist, and the fact that the government can't shut it down, it's just true. It is reality.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to talk to my buddy, because he's pretty smart on this stuff, Brett, who is a local rancher that a good friend of mine, client of ours. He actually, at some point, he's going to come on the show, which I'm just going to segue into that. We're not changing the way we do the show, but we're going to start having some more guests on. So in the pipeline, and we didn't talk too much about finance or infinite banking here, although that's a private contract, pretty interesting thing, and the contract law side of the world. But yeah, he's going to come on. We're going to have somebody to talk about the purchasing of businesses. We're going to have somebody to come on to talk about all-in-one mortgages, which are a fascinating topic. We're going to have somebody to come on. We're going to start throwing in more and more guests talking about things we can do in the infinite banking world, just to let you know that there's some new things on the horizon with the show, which should be awesome. And maybe an occasional drop like this that strays from our typical discussion.
We'll have Rob Green. You're coming on soon. People in our fight, people in the mandate fight, everyone knows Rob Green. Got his book right there.
If you haven't read this, Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines, get yourself a copy of it, or contact one of us. We can get you a copy of it for sure.
I'll mail you one. I got a box of them. That is a man who is still active duty, who called out by name the individual admirals and generals who perpetrated this crime while in uniform. That is stones of steel. So Rob, we love you. Come on the show soon.
He's a hero, and we're real grateful to have him in the network and to be friends with him and have the opportunity to talk with him. So we're going to do that soon too. But yeah, good stuff on the horizon, man. It was a good discussion. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll fire in the belly there.
Yeah, I just want to end this with saying my knowledge of this stuff is first grade level. I'm just starting to really learn it. So I might even said some things that are incorrect, and that's fine. Whatever. I make mistakes, and correct me if you find it. But I'm going to learn a lot more about this, and we're going to take action down the road. It's going to be exciting.
Well, give yourself some credit. You're like a homeschool first grader, so it's like a public school 10th grader. So you're.
Yeah. But I figure as I'm learning it, might as well share it. It's impactful.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, brother. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Cheers.
See you.